Hi, I'm Drew Youngdyke, and this is the National Wildlife Federation's Outdoors Podcast. Now, you may have noticed with our last episode with Mark Smith about Asian carp that we recently changed our name from the Conservation Country Podcast to NWF Outdoors. And that's in line with our recent rebranding and making sure that we're all in alignment and everybody knows exactly what we're talking about. So we're excited about this change and hope you get used to it. And with that change, we've also gone to a slightly different format. Once a month, we're going to post the long-form interviews like we just did with Mark, which you can check out on episode 9 last week, going into the depth and the history of the effort to keep Asian carp out of the Great Lakes. But in between those monthly long-form interview episodes, we're also going to be posting, like this episode, just some short rundowns of some of the conservation news affecting hunters and anglers that have happened across the country over the week. And we're not going to do a comprehensive list. Frankly, if you're paying attention, you already know some of the major things that are going on. But what we're going to do is just selectively take some of the things that we're seeing from the National Wildlife Federation, some of those stories that you may have missed that are critical for protecting the fish and wildlife and the public lands that we love to hunt and fish. And so I want to let you know what's coming up in the future. So in a couple weeks, we're going to have Heather Shaw, biologist for the Ruffed Grouse Society, in for our long-form interview. We're going to be talking about active forest management, why that's good for wildlife habitat, what's going on with ruffed grouse across the country, and how landowners can help with that, and how active working forests can help with that as well. So we're really looking forward to that. I'm actually up in the Pigeon River country right now, getting ready for an advisory council meeting that I serve on, and getting ready for the Michigan Trout opener. And so I get a chance to sit down with her later today and record that interview. In the meantime, though, let's get to a couple of the news items that have happened over the course of this week. The main one that I really want you to focus on and really wanted to draw your attention to comes from out west. And what happened was the National Wildlife Federation conducted a poll of Colorado and New Mexico voters. And they're polling them about public supports for protecting wildlife migration routes. And the results were staggering. You can read all about this on NWF.org under the latest news and press releases, but I just want to hit a couple of the highlights here. So they polled voters of Colorado and New Mexico about various different questions regarding wildlife migration corridors. They want to see what's the public support for that. So when we're looking for political and policy solutions, we want to make sure we have public support behind that. And what they showed that over 73% of voters in those two states supported every potential solution, from building overpasses on highways to preventing oil and gas development in known wildlife corridors. And some of the broken down points of that are when you're talking about ensuring migration protections in national forests, they were 94% in favor. For building more overpasses and underpasses, 87% in favor. Guaranteeing land use planners consider wildlife corridors, 87%. And even preventing oil and gas and other development in known wildlife corridors, 73% in favor. Now, what does this support mean? Obviously, when we're talking about implementing the types of protections that we need for wildlife corridors, for big game species like bighorn sheep, mule deer, pronghorn antelope, you name it. When it comes to actually implementing those, it takes multiple stakeholders from state and federal agencies, it takes lawmakers, it takes private landowners, it takes a lot of collaboration. Oftentimes, it means that it might come down to a vote by elected officials either at the state, local, or federal level. But what a poll like this shows, and the importance of a poll like this being released, is that especially in those two states, Colorado, New Mexico, that when elected leaders are considering, should I support this proposal, they know that they have the overwhelming backing of their constituents to protect those wildlife migration corridors for wildlife. So that's in New Mexico and Colorado. And our affiliate organizations, our state affiliates for the National Wildlife Federation, are also working on migration issues up in Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. And for those of you that don't know, the National Wildlife Federation operates as a true federation of independent state affiliates. So there are independent state conservation organizations representing 51 states and territories. They get together and decide our policy at the National Wildlife Federation, not the other way around. But we work in partnership on lots of issues too, and we consider everybody within that partnership part of the one federation. The Idaho Wildlife Federation, Montana Wildlife Federation, and Wyoming Wildlife Federation have announced a recent partnership with Hunt to Eat. Hunt to Eat makes hunting apparel, promoting hunting as a food source. That's super popular, run by Monty Patelis. And they've announced a recent partnership as well as a collaboration on a t-shirt promoting and celebrating the migration corridors that go through the Yellowstone and the Rockies up through Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. You can find that t-shirt. It's a really cool design at hunttoeat.com. And actually, if you buy that t-shirt, Hunt to Eat is donating 15% of the profits to those 3 state conservation organizations. So exciting work going on regarding migration corridors throughout the Rocky Mountain West. Now, Brian Brooks of the Idaho Wildlife Federation joined our podcast for one of our first 5 episodes to talk about some of the work that they do. And some of the work that they've been doing very recently this spring has really caught my eye. The salmon returning to Idaho from the Pacific Ocean have been collapsing. They're just not making it back in the numbers. Fishing seasons have been closed on certain rivers. There was a proposal last year under threat of lawsuit to close an entire fishing season. And so what Idaho Wildlife Federation has been doing is urging those elected leaders, holding meetings across the state, and really pushing for a new approach to salmon recovery in Idaho. You can find that information at idahowildlife.org. And staying out in the Rockies, I also want to draw attention to a new film that was released from our friends at Conservation Hawks. It's called In the Heart of the Rockies. Hatch Magazine has a link to it, and it talks about the impacts of climate change on hunters and anglers throughout the West. It features fishing legends kind of like Hillary Hutchinson, Hal Herring, who is a conservation writer for Field and Stream and host actually of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers podcast and blast, and Todd Tanner, who runs Conservation Hawks, as well as some other personalities in hunting and fishing. It's a really powerful film. I just got a chance to watch it, and I'd recommend that you do too. You know, climate change is not something that we hunters and anglers can ignore. It affects the fish and wildlife that we pursue and that support our pursuits. So if we want our kids and grandkids to have those same opportunities that we've had, it's something that we need to take seriously. And I think that this film really delivers the message in a succinct way of just how those are all related. This has been the National Wildlife Federation Outdoors podcast. It's brought to you by Rep Your Water. Rep Your Water donates 3% of its proceeds to conservation causes, and actually they donate 3% of their Great Lakes merchandise to the National Wildlife Federation Great Lakes Regional Center for our work on trying to keep Asian carp out of the Great Lakes to protect our fisheries there. You can find that at repyourwater.com. Next week, we'll be back with another short news update just like this one. In 3 weeks, we'll have that interview with Heather Shaw, wildlife biologist for the Ruffed Grouse Society. Looking forward to that. Thank you for listening, and tune back in next week to the National Wildlife Federation Outdoors Podcast.